Hello everybody. Today I wanted to shoot this video to help you become a better witness to your felt experience of your body. Our felt experience is one of the most simple and important ways that we can connect with ourselves. It's a way that we can start to actually understand the language of our body, and when we develop this understanding and this consistent connection with our physical felt experience, what we're actually doing is learning how to process the ways that we naturally move through cycles of um, stressful occurrences, also the ways and the patterns that are developed around just feeling safe and connected within our body, and looking at how just through a more consistent practice of being a witness to our felt experience, we're actually able to learn how to navigate through both positive and negative responses within our body based on what has happened in our life. And in doing so, we're able to actually break things down to a more simple place, and that gives us the ability to contain, to regulate, and to move through that nervous system response, that really basic nervous system response, which is that felt experience. And that creates a process where we're starting to release stress rather than starting to shut down and freeze, which makes it so the stress starts to accumulate within our body. And the key to releasing stress in our autonomic nervous system is actually being in touch with our felt experience and getting more familiar with releasing sensations and feelings that are actually maybe considered more activating or more overwhelming. So when we go through a stressful occurrence in our life currently, or we've been through a stressful occurrence in the past, what we want to start to be able to do is actually to get more familiar with being able to manage and handle those sensations. What that does is it actually allows us to stay with the feelings of in relation to our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, or the sensations and the feelings of that more shut down and freeze response that is in relationship to an accumulation of stress or things being too much. And we want to actually be able to navigate through that. And what that does is actually allows for that energy to be released from our body, and that stimulates more of that rest and digest, the regulated aspects of our experience, where we start to actually feel safe and we feel okay, and we develop more relationship to our physical body, where it's not fearful, where it's not overwhelming. And that has a huge impact on how we start to relate to our external environment. One of the things that I've been really aware of in my life is that actually, when I find myself in a place where I'm nervous or overwhelmed or anxious, what starts to follow is that I start to relate in my environment from that anxiousness and that nervousness, that there's a relationship with what's happening inside my body and then what's happening outside my body. If I'm feeling really overwhelmed, fearful, then my thoughts are going to cycle around what is happening in my environment that is causing that. What are the fearful things that are happening in my environment? And then also the thoughts that kind of go along with that, of identifying myself as an issue, as a problem, looking at myself as not enough in my environment, or even just always thinking that things are unsafe or I'm not okay in this moment. And I think that that's what we start to look at, is that the relationship with our body dictates the relationship I'm going to have with the external world, and actually dictates the expression of my body on how I'm going to extend out and start to live my life. That if I'm coming from a nervous place, then I'm going to express myself in a really anxious way, in a quicker way that makes it so I'm not able to actually have a relationship in which I feel okay, a relationship in which I'm able to connect with everything that's happening around me, and I'm going to start to actually miss a lot of the signals in my environment that let me know that I'm safe, that I can be engaged, and really, I think in a more simple way, that I can actually be myself, that I can be Jake and connect it from that place. So I think when we're looking at stress and when we're looking at our autonomic nervous system, what we're actually doing is developing a relationship with ourself where we feel safer being ourself. And I think that's the base of all trauma work, is reclaiming more of our authenticity and reclaiming more of ourself in this process of learning how to manage, release, and regulate our nervous system. What I wanted to really touch on today, within that felt experience, is talk a little bit about why it is we lose a relationship with our felt experience, and then give you guys a couple of practices, one that can be more of a longer form practice for slowing things down and really relating to that felt experience of your body and actually getting a little more familiar with aspects of your body that feel okay, that feel inviting, feel easy to connect with, and then also learning how to kind of what the expressions are of the body where it does feel a little more tense and anxious, and that through this practice we can just kind of really hone our skill of being able to touch into what we're feeling in this moment. I also wanted to give you a couple techniques that I utilize, that I teach a lot in groups, where we're having a more consistent reference back to our physical felt experience and coming back to that witness. And that's what I really want to offer today, is you becoming a better witness to what it is that's happening in this moment within your body, and also what's happening in this moment around you. That we want to be a consistent witness. We want to have a consistent relationship with our body. I think the foundation of that is through our felt experience. So first, what I wanted to go over is, how do we lose a relationship with our body? And I think, it has a lot to do with trauma and basically the responses that follow a traumatic event. Traumatic events don't have to be necessarily one big thing that happened in your life. It could be repetitive small things that happened in the past. It could be us being a very sensitive person and things impacted us in a greater way than maybe it would have other people. So, and what happens in those moments is basically trauma is anything that was too much for us to process and handle at the time. And because of that, it interrupted a lot of the responses that we needed to take, that our nervous system needed to go through in order to protect us. And so we could release that energy and actually move into more regulation, where we start to feel safe and okay again. So again, trauma is anything that causes us to feel overwhelmed and too much within our nervous system. And because of that, we weren't able to process and regulate that situation to the point where we started to feel safe again, and we were able to move through that and release that energy from our body. So basically, trauma creates a process where we lose relationship with our body, and because of that, those cycles of overwhelm, of panic, of fear continue on in our life, because our nervous system is still trying to protect us from an event that happened within our past. And that's why it's so important to look at our witness and becoming a witness to our felt experience, because trauma all represents a moment in time where we lost relationship with our body. I think an example I often use is, a child that is in a threatening environment. As children, we don't get to choose the environment we live in. We are with the parents that we get, and we don't have a lot of control over our environment. We can't just leave our house because we're so dependent on others for our survival, our emotional support, our sense of well-being is dictated by our environment. So if we're continuously exposed to an overwhelming situation, what happens is that we actually move into more of a fight or flight or a sympathetic response within our environment. So our nervous system is more activated towards threat. So in our body, what we're starting to feel is anxiousness, fear, overwhelm, powerlessness, anger, rage, resentment in those moments based on our environment. So we're more activated, okay? And what we can look at is that when we're more activated and our environment doesn't change to meet our needs or to make us feel safe, what that means is that we're going to stay in that sympathetic response. And that's really hard for our body to stay in fight or flight for a long period of time. That's a lot of energy that we're mobilizing, and our body always wants to get back into a baseline where we can rest and digest, where our immune system is stimulated, where we have more of a natural functioning of our breathing patterns, of our heart rate, where our endocrine system is functioning properly. And so what happens is that our environment creates a process where we're very taxed a lot of times. There's a lot of load on our body systems, and our body is always wanting to get into that baseline. So in the absence of being able to actually release that sympathetic energy, in the absence of being able to actually have a real restorative form of regulation, what we naturally do to preserve is we actually start to shut down through what we call a dorsal vagal freeze response. And what that does is actually we're shutting down from the physical feelings within our body. Okay, so, and then also because our environment is continually adding in stimulation that's overwhelming, it's adding more and more to that load. What we start to do is we start to actually shut down from our environment. When I've talked to clients about this situation, a lot of times examples come up of, I would go to the closet and I would hide, or I would stay in my room and I would just kind of tune everything out. And that's an example of how we're starting to create behavior when we're young where we isolate and we distance ourselves, and that's part of that freeze response. We're just trying to preserve our energy in those moments. So what you're basically seeing there is that there's starting to be developed a loss of relationship with the physical feelings of our autonomic nervous system, of our body, where we're no longer processing and managing our stress. We're no longer regulating it, but we're holding it and containing it within our body. And this is where we want to look at that, the importance of developing and starting this process of connecting with the felt experience of our body, because this is what is lost, that our relationship with our body starts to be formed around that it's always too much, it's threatening, it doesn't feel safe within my body based on that accumulation of stress. And so what we want to start to do is to reform some of these patterns where we start to develop a relationship with the language of our body. One of the initial ways that I suggest that people do this is actually through a little bit of contact, touch, and pressure. And I think that we always want to be looking at, how tolerable this is at first. Looking at kind of how can we create this connection with our body, start to relate to our felt experience in a way that doesn't overwhelm us. It doesn't make us so we're reliving overwhelming feelings and emotions. So that's not what we want to do. We want to start an initial contact with our body in a really slow process of contacting our body. One way to look at this is, in my experience, I have a lot of past experience with working in nature, with animals. I grew up on a farm with livestock, and Whenever you're working with animals, you always want to take such a slow approach of developing that relationship with them, because you want to start to initially develop a lot of trust. So you don't want to make them afraid. You don't want them to associate you with big energy and threat. You want them to there to be a slow process where they're getting used to you being actually like a safe, calm person. One of the things that my dad always taught me is that whenever you walk up to a dog, you don't just go and touch them because you don't know the dog. And when you're around in a rural area, there's a lot of people with dogs. We always had dogs around the house. And what you want to do is first walk up to them. You don't even look them in the eye, but you just put your hand out and you let them start to smell your hand. And that starts to develop that contact and that relationship. So it's like the initial stage of you actually being a safe and familiar person. And then later on, maybe you just put your hand up against their face. You know, another thing is with a horse, you don't actually come up to them and go full force square to them. You actually want to look to the side and move slowly towards them, and then give them the opportunity to actually turn towards you. So it gives them that choice, and that they automatically look at you as not a predatorial animal, but actually an animal or a relationship where there is not that threat. I'm just saying that because that's kind of what we want to do in a way with ourself in this relationship to stress within our body. We want to actually start very, very slowly connecting with our body and connecting with where things can be a little slower and safer. One of the ways that we can do that is starting with orientation towards pressure with our hands, and actually starting with just pressure and kind of making contact with our hands. And then what we want to do is start to actually move through our body and bringing that pressure to more of our body. And actually starting out with not that internal experience, but actually kind of what is just happening on the surface of our skin. And starting to, as we contact that felt experience, starting to learn what that language is of our body. So if I put my hands on my body, if I feel the pressure of my skin, I might notice sensations of heat, coolness, pressure. I might notice shaking or tingling. I might not notice overwhelm. I might notice where it feels closed or open, where it feels like teary, where it feels, again, like shaky and tingling and solid. You know, those are all words that describe this felt experience of my body, and I want to start to develop a relationship with that. So I thought maybe we could just go through this practice a little bit so you have kind of some direction on where to start. I think one thing that we want to also address is that when we are not used to connecting with our body, when we're used to everything being overwhelming, when we're used to spinning thoughts, it is really hard to sit still and to meditate and to connect with ourselves. That's just, for a lot of us, that is the baseline for which we start this work, that it's not easy to sit still, it's not easy to be here, it's not easy to connect, it's not easy to relate to what we're feeling. And honestly, I have been there. I know what that's like, so I can really relate to that experience. So one of the things that is the benefit of actually creating movement and touch with ourselves is that it gives us more of an active process. It's not that we're just sitting here and we're still the whole time. That what we're actually doing is we're actually creating movement and activation. And as you do that, you can start with very small, just your hands, and that can be just for a moment. or you can go through a longer process of connecting with a lot more of what you're feeling in your body. But just knowing that that movement can help us to actually make this a successful practice rather than us just trying to sit still and clear our mind for half an hour. Okay, so let's just go through a little bit of this exercise, and then I want to talk about some of the other ways that other practices that we can utilize to be a more consistent witness for ourselves. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start with our hands. Okay, so begin to just apply pressure to your hands. And just notice what is the feeling of the hands that goes along with that pressure. And again, we want to start with more of the external experience of our body. So maybe more just our skin at this time, okay? And the pressure of our hands. Okay, so as you do that, just notice what the physical experience is as you're becoming that witness. Is it tense? Is it tight? Is it open? Is it closed? Is it tingly? Is it shaky? Okay, and then we'll move up to our forearms and just apply that pressure again. And just notice at the very surface of our skin, what is the felt experience? And just moving and creating that kind of rubbing, that pressure. And again, what is that felt experience? And try to connect this with your body rather than your mind. So rather than the description of what's happening, actually the feeling of what's happening. And then we can go up to our bicep, tricep, and apply that pressure again. Noticing the sensation just at the surface of the skin. Okay, and then moving up to the shoulders, and then having our arms crossed, and then applying that pressure and just noticing what's the really surface of that pressure. So this might feel warm, tight, tense, it might be shaky, it might be more open, it might actually feel warm and inviting, solid. Okay, and then we'll just move on to the chest, just placing the hand on the chest. And just feeling that surface of the skin, feeling the pressure. And again, what is that sensation of the body? So it might feel, again, warm, cool, safe, open, closed. Okay, and then we'll move down more towards our stomach, our core, and just kind of bringing some of that movement in. And something to just be aware of is that we often hold more of our stress and tension within the core of our body. So it can be easier to connect with more of our hands, more of those external experiences. So just to be aware that if this is too much or if it's overwhelming, don't overwhelm. Stay more external. Start with, again, where it's a little bit easier and safer. So this becomes a process of slowly acclimating. But if you do feel like you're able to really notice the core and apply that pressure, then go ahead and do that. Okay. And just notice that surface of the skin, and then what is the physical sensation of the body. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll just go right back to the hands. And again, noticing that sensation there. Okay, and then we'll just close that technique. So this is something you can use going through actually your whole body. As you get more used to this process, you can go, from the hands, arms, chest, core, down to the legs, and then up to the head. And again, just tracking the felt experience and starting with that surface of the skin. And what you're going to start to notice as you keep working on it is that you're going to get more familiar with sensations in your body that are easy to connect with. And then actually what you're going to develop relationship with is more of those feelings and sensations that are more difficult to connect with. And actually that's what we want. Because of trauma, what it's created is a process where we lost relationship with our body based on difficult feelings and experiences. What we want to learn how to do is to develop more relationship with our body and develop more relationship with that stress, so we can learn how our body naturally releases and regulates that experience. Okay, so being with tension, being with overwhelm, being with shaking, being with tears, being with emotions is how we start to manage and release that stress so it doesn't accumulate within our body. Developing that relationship with the felt experience is how we start to actually create that process. I think another thing that's really important is that we become a consistent witness to our body. So we have consistent practices that we can utilize over and over and over again through our day. So we don't have to sit down and do a process like this. We can actually just bring it into almost every moment or any moment where we feel like we need a little more contact with ourselves. I think those are actually what benefits us more than even, sitting down for a longer practice. So I just wanted to give you a couple tools for that. One of them is to actually connect with your breath, your breathing patterns. So actually slowing down and taking a couple breaths and actually noticing how the breath enters your nose, how it moves through your throat, how it moves into your lungs, and just noticing that expansion and contraction. Okay. Another tool that we have to become a better witness is placing a hand on our chest and actually noticing what we're feeling in our body in that moment. So this is a practice I give almost every single client that comes into my private practice is put your hand on your chest, just notice what is happening in this moment. What are you feeling in your body? And just doing that over and over and over. Another thing that we just used was more kind of movement and holding. I think that's really something that's really beneficial that we can use really often, especially when we feel really anxious or when our emotions are moving more towards activation around a situation, and that it's really good in those moments to create containment and holding for our emotional experience. So what I do is actually hold my hands. I might go like this and give myself a squeeze. I might put my hands up here, or I might come to the chest and actually just holding that experience and feeling that difficult emotion that is starting to be expressed in our body, and just kind of staying with it even for just a moment is beneficial. I'm not trying to get the emotion to go away. I'm just starting to develop a relationship with it and get more familiar with how that moves within my body. Another thing is the present moment. So everyone says, be present, be present, be present, be present, come into the present moment. And I think that a lot of that is true, is that when we want to start to develop a relationship with our body and with our nervous system, we have to do that through feeling safe in this moment. We have more safety and regulation within our nervous system that helps us to move out of fight or flight or freeze and into more of our parasympathetic nervous system, which has more of a relationship with safety and actually being present in this moment. So that's what we're doing when we come into the moment. A way to do that is I use my hand on my chest, and then maybe I look around my environment and start to resource my environment for what right now makes me feel safe. For me, my body and my feelings have been a kind of anchor point for a witness and an anchor point for actually feeling the present moment. So I put my hand on my chest and I just notice what's happening right now in this moment, and bring myself back into what's currently going on. Okay. So those are some exercises, some resources to use. You don't have to do them all. Pick one, use it over and over and over. Let me know how it goes in the comments. Feel free to share your experience, to message me. I'd love to just see how this goes for you. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you later, okay?